We have breaking political news. Moments ago, New York City Mayor and now 2020 presidential candidate Bill de Blasio kicked off his campaign by posting this video to social media.
Here in New York City, a place that is legendarily tough and big and complicated. Good thing about New Yorkers is they look the same whether they're really pissed off at you or they like you. We built an agenda that puts working families first. Doesn't matter if you live in a city or a rural area, a big state, a small state, doesn't matter what your ethnicity is. People in every part of this country feel stuck or even like they're going backwards. But the rich got richer.
I'm a New Yorker. I've known Trump's a bully for a long time. This is not news to me or anyone else here. And I know how to take him on. Don't back down in the face of a bully. Confront him. Take him on. As president, I will take on the wealthy. I will take on the big corporations. I will not rest until this government serves working people. As mayor of the largest city in America, I've done just that.
De Blasio for president, guys.
Donald Trump must be stopped. I've beaten him before, and I will do it again. I'm Bill de Blasio, and I'm running for president because it's time we put working people first.
Okay, another one jumps in. Joe, what do you think?
Well, listen, that's just a great kickoff ad, because the thing, even before seeing it, the thing that I thought de Blasio would have going for him is he's obviously, you know, he's grown up politically in the toughest political market in America, just like Donald Trump. There's a reason why Donald Trump knows how to work the press, knows how to play the press, can take all the punches, because, again, he grew up in New York City tabloid culture. He gave as good as he got. You've got the same thing with de Blasio, who you grow up in this media hothouse and suddenly getting negative headlines elsewhere aren't as much of a problem. Susan, you've obviously been engaged in New York politics before. I know there are going to be skeptics with Bill de Blasio, but we never know how these elections end until they end. And I thought that was a pretty impressive start, saying, hey, I'm a New Yorker, I'm tough, I know how to stand up to this guy, I know him, you have to confront bullies.
Well, Joe, I agree about the point of handling the New York press corps, because it is a tough animal to conquer. But I didn't hear anything new there. I didn't hear anything that makes him unique. The only thing that I figure that he's going to stand out among this crowd is that he's 6 inches taller than everybody else. That's about the only way he's going to stand out, the way I see it.
Wow.
Have you seen?
Jeez. All right.
I disagree.
Don't hold back.
In this respect, let me bring in Yamiche. And Yamiche, I'm not asking you to give your opinion, but
Susan makes a good point.
Well, but I don't know.
What was new?
So much, Yamiche, is about who can beat Trump. It has to do with style. Who can you imagine standing on a stage with Donald Trump at the debate, and somebody that's going to give as much as they take? That certainly was a more aggressive, more strident style than we've heard from the overwhelming majority of Democratic candidates, wasn't it?
That's true. I think that Bill de Blasio is saying, I'm here not to think about the 25 other people, maybe 30 other people that are going to end up running against me for the Democratic primary, but I'm focused on really taking it to the president and bringing that New York style that we've seen kind of happen when Chuck Schumer's come to the White House and other people. When you see a New Yorker going up against a New Yorker, in some ways you can see that they're both playing on the same field. The thing I'll say is that I'm thinking of Joe Biden's video, which really talked about Charlottesville, which really talked about kind of this idea of this being a crisis of the conscience of America, and then you juxtapose that with Bill de Blasio, who was talking about the country, but also showed a lot of shots of New York City and the beautiful skyline as he was talking about taking on Wall Street and dealing with working class people. So in some ways, I think that video was very much a New York video, but also trying to broaden it out. But he I think in a lot of ways was still focused on New York in this video.
So de Blasio's slogan is going to be working people first. He's going to make a formal announcement later this morning. A two-term mayor, by the way, will join us here on Morning Joe tomorrow. tomorrow to discuss his new campaign before he heads to Iowa and then to South Carolina. So, Mike, the case for Bill de Blasio is he runs a city of 8.6 million people, which is bigger than 38 states, including 3 states that have governors running for president, Montana, Colorado, and Washington. Historically low crime in New York City, good jobs numbers, and yet his approval rating is at about 40 to 42% in this city. They're not happy about the Amazon deal. They're not happy that the subways are garbage right now, and a series of other problems that plague this city. In fact, there was a Q poll last month that showed 76% of New Yorkers think it's a bad idea for Bill de Blasio to run for president. They want him to stay here and take care of the city.
Yeah, look, Willie, I'm trying to be charitable here. Bill de Blasio is a nice guy, and we all need to put a smile on our faces early in the morning. We discussed, some terribly divisive issues. So Bill de Blasio's announcement that he's running for president would put a smile on your face. For what reason is probably not appropriate to get into, given the early nature of his presidency. The thing that struck me, this is just me, about the tape that we just saw, is that he's talking about working people first, and he's talking about it from the back seat of a chauffeur-driven limousine, driven by 2 New York City police officers.
Right.
He's got a privileged life, as he ought to have. He's the mayor. He needs protection. But Eddie, I don't know that he poses a threat to Bernie Sanders or anyone else in the field.
Yeah, there are a lot of folks in that lane, but I think it's important that a voice like Bill de Blasio's is in the primary. It's an echo in some ways of Sherrod Brown's phrase, the dignity of work. But the way in which de Blasio is putting forward that claim, at least in this video, it's not to kind of parse middle America over against, the coastal cities. It's not to talk about white blue-collar workers in rural Missouri over against, blue-collar workers in Harlem or in Brooklyn. Right? It's to talk about the dignity of work across difference. And I think that's an important voice to have in this conversation as 22, 23 people fight it out.
Don't you think it's there now?
It's there, but I think it's always important to have another exclamation point. You don't want to have 5 exclamation points, but you can have 2 at least.
Well, the thing is, Willie, style does matter. And if you want to see how style trumps substance, not only in Republican primaries, but Democratic primaries, look at what's happened in American politics over the past 20 years. Donald Trump got elected because of his style. It was sure as hell wasn't because of policies, because he had no policies. So that's why I would be less focused on what lane de Blasio feels than temperamentally how he squares up with Donald Trump. And there will be voters. If he takes it to Trump on the campaign trail, if he makes headlines every day like Trump did by not being bombastic, but being very aggressive in a way that more traditional candidates will not be aggressive, well, he may be another New Yorker that grabs a lot of headlines and grabs some support.
And he already has performed that way. Even as mayor, he takes on Donald Trump all the time. And Peter Baker, it's an interesting sort of paradox here where you have the mayor of the country's biggest city, which by many measures is thriving right now. Not for everyone, of course, but it is thriving in terms of crime and employment at low levels. And yet there is this initial skepticism from almost everyone. You mention the name Bill de Blasio for president, people go, oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, it's funny that Pete Buttigieg, the mayor of a much smaller town with much less to show for it, in a sense, has so much more captivated Democratic voters and media attention and so forth at this point. I thought that video was a little odd. I think Mike was right. The idea of riding around in the back of your limousine talking about working class over the powerful seemed very jarring. I didn't understand what the message was. I mean, there's some nice stock photos of New York. That's great. But what is he running to be president for? It wasn't really very clear. So it's a hard thing in a field of 21, 22, whatever number of candidates it is to distinguish yourself. And what is it you're bringing to that? What is it you're arguing about? What is it you're saying you did for New York that you plan to do for the rest of the country? And I didn't hear him talk about that.
Yeah, so we'll have him on tomorrow. We're going to get back to the 2020 conversation more in our show today. But
thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.